Hello, world. Welcome to Discover Your Talent, Do What You Love, number 267. I'm creator and host, Don Hutcheson. Every day, I interview someone from around the world who has discovered his talents to do work he loves to create a life of success, satisfaction, and freedom. Being a police officer didn't do it for Raffaele. Being an emergency medical technician and a security officer left him longing for something more. After moving to Alaska to provide security for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, he got a call from military friends who needed his skills overseas. Today, I'm delighted to bring you our featured guest, Raffaele Di Giorgio. Raffaele, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Are you using your talents doing work that you love?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All righty. We want to hear the whole story. The author, Raffaele M. Di Giorgio, is a mentor, instructor, and field operations specialist. He's a licensed paramedic in the United States as well as in the UK. When not actively engaged in teaching, Raffaele stays active in the field at various operational levels, providing government agencies with protection and medical services throughout the world, including the provision of support to cabinet and ambassadorial level protection details in high-threat and non-pervasive environments. Raffaele, that's a summary of your career. Tell our listeners around the world what you're engaged in now that has you excited and interested.
Actually, there's a few venues, and I'm really fortunate to be where I am. Currently, I own my own business, which, one, absolutely helps me pursue other interests.
Yes.
My wife and I think it's fantastic because it allows us to balance our professional and personal lives. About 60 to 70% of my professional time is spent training federal employees and contractors on the skill sets that are necessary to operate in some of the more challenging environments around the world, domestically and abroad. Then I have my speaking engagements and consulting, which goes hand in hand with the book I just released because it allows me to give public and private service agencies from local, state, national, even international levels help in developing emergency response plans. And while that may have been overplayed over the years, now obviously with our current and fluid dynamics, both domestically and abroad, we're finding that the lessons I've learned with 12 years of working overseas are becoming more and more prevalent in the United States, such as San Bernardino and the Boston bombing and those things.
Yes. I can't imagine a more vitally urgent and needed service than what you provide right now.
And, because it's such a new career niche with the implementation of medical being moved far forward from where it conventionally used to be, it's such a new dynamic that we are trying to get it where not only are we doing great things at the time of the incident, but we're also trying to make sure that everybody protects themselves as an individual and as an agency for the afterward, the unfortunate litigation, the times when the optimum outcome isn't always achieved. And that allows me to come into where I am able to dedicate some of my time to mentoring up and coming protection professionals as well as emergency medical professionals for them as a career path because of the new dynamic and it being a new career path. There's not a well-structured career path out there. So I help them with that, whether they're building a small, similar to what I am, a small company moving forward, or whether they work for a larger metro and they just want to be able to move their career path forward. And hopefully I'm doing a good job at helping them to get where I find myself nowadays, in a place where I'm happy and I'm serving a population that really and truly deserves the best care they can possibly get. And then on the volunteer side, I'm affiliated with a nonprofit out of Texas called Sons of the Flag. And that's a nonprofit organization committed to supporting military first responders and civilian burn survivors by funding innovative research, technology, and education. Because unfortunately, in the United States, we have such a need for more rapid access to burn centers and quality burn care for people. So that was something that a friend of mine, Ryan Parrott, former Navy SEAL, started that up. And because of the situation I find myself in, again, back to the having my own business and being able to pick and choose the clients or the projects I want to be on, it affords me the time to give back. And at 47, that's unique as opposed to having to wait to later stages of life to start giving back.
You're not kidding. Well, take just a minute. This is about your story and your career and vision, but take just a minute or so and explain how you engage that 60 to 70% of your time to train employees or to train individuals to work in this space.
It's a kaleidoscope of a variety of skill sets, everything from high performance driving to pre-hospital medical care to situational awareness that, whether you're in a large city like New York City or whether you're somewhere like Baghdad or Islamabad. And so we take the whole course is built up of individual modules that have all been predicated on some of the best practices from the federal government, obviously being out there, and then some of the mentors that have mentored me over the years on working in these hostile environments. And I've taken that, and then fortunately, I guess the first 5-6 years that I was overseas, I was like everybody else, a new guy working on these different programs and details, and I just adapted better and better to it, moved up the progression ladder, and was being tasked with larger and better contracts. And finally, I guess I did it enough times, somebody thought I knew what I was doing pretty well.
Yes.
And I got pushed into the teaching training side of it for foreign nationals as well as U.S. citizens that are working in these environments. It really has been a progression over about 12 years of working internationally.
Okay. Do you travel a lot? Do you take on projects that are in other countries?
Absolutely. Here the past year, fortunately, I have a client in the Northern Virginia area that I do the majority of the training for. But for the past 11 years, I've spent upwards of 10 months a year deployed overseas in just about 18 countries that I've provided teaching or actual services to.
Good heavens. That's amazing. Well, as you well know, everyone's life journey is composed of a series of turning points, passages they're called. At these times, we're faced with obstacles and opportunities and choices that define the next period of our lives. So take us as far back in your backstory, Raffaele, to what got you here and what makes Raffaele Di Giorgio.
Well, I came to the States when I was about 9 years old. I was originally born in Messina, Italy. And so I had that unique perspective of I didn't speak the language, had to learn to assimilate into American culture. And so that drove home, I guess, more of a patriotic nature than some of my classmates and peers because they just took it for granted. They were always American.
Sure.
So that led me to flash forward high school, lost my father junior year of high school, so decided to drop out of high school, got my GED, went into the U.S. Army, and that reinforced that whole patriotism, I guess the whole giving back, service something bigger than yourself.
What was your MOS?
Oh, geez. Basically, it was infantry.
Okay.
And then went through there, got out, thought I was going to be a cop because that's what I always gravitated to. And then when I finally became a cop in New Jersey, which took several years of civil service exams and stuff, I didn't get the complete satisfaction that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Everything in a police department is very structured, and it wasn't the structure that I was where it was the ability to move up and to entertain different ideas. I mean, at that time we had the Bank of America robbery in Hollywood and the frustration level of not being able to get emergency medical services to the police officers. And that kind of laid the base or foundation for where my life would go from there.
Hold on just a second now, because
sure.
I have a vague recollection of that, but take just a minute. What happened at that Bank of America robbery in Hollywood?
That was the one where the robbers were dressed in armor. They were using automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons, and they held down the Los Angeles police responding officers for quite some time. Back then, conventional wisdom and the standard operating procedures were that ambulance services, firefighter services couldn't enter that area until the police deemed it safe. So not through any fault of their own, but just because of the way litigation, contract liabilities, and memorandums of understanding were aligned, civilian EMS couldn't enter the area because it wasn't deemed so-called safe by the police organization. Firefighters can't enter it for the same reason police officers can't enter an active fire until the fire chief claims that the fire scene is safe.
Okay.
So it became a real watershed moment in law enforcement where how do we get advanced medical care or even basic medical care to police officers that are wounded during an active tactical situation?
Did people lose their lives?
Some people did lose their lives. Other people had just suffered needlessly for half hour to 45 minutes until each section was able to be controlled, contained by law enforcement, and then moving the medical services into that arena.
How do you handle that now?
Well, now tactical emergency medicine has come a long way. We've borrowed, I guess if you want to call it, the standard operating procedures from the military, where in the military, any team that goes forward usually has a combat medic or a Navy corpsman embedded with them. So they bring their own medical services with them.
Okay, that's good.
And so that has pushed. The same thing with the Oklahoma bombing. Medical services were there within 5-10 minutes compared to the long wait times, but there was still no definitive SOPs out there, and there was no state statutes that protected first responders from going into there.
Okay.
And then even as recently as the San Bernardino shootings, there was a article in, I believe, the LA Times where a couple of medical officers, medical doctors actually, that were part of a tactical response team expressed their frustration, and they had no clear SOPs on how to mitigate all the traffic stops. So it took them about 45 minutes to travel somewhere around 10 or 12 miles to get to the scene to start administering care. And then that's kind of where my whole, I guess if you want to say niche market comes in, is how to develop these SOPs for these different agencies and private entities so that we can facilitate getting that first aid and that emergency medical system in place quickly and effectively, and still try to reduce the risk as much as possible. I mean, we're never going to eliminate it, but at least we can make best practices and make them universal.
Well, it's come light years. Everything you're saying, these are epic changes that for the good of everyone. You must be utterly proud of that.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, I'm not trying to claim that I developed the whole thing myself.
I know that.
It has been a tremendous career path to be in because it's always changing and dynamic, and it's in its infancy. So it's great to be involved even on the periphery with it.
Yes. Well, it's so fascinating to learn about. Thank you for sharing that and shedding light on that particular thing. Back to the storyline. Not satisfied being a cop in New Jersey because you just couldn't use your talents, actually. You couldn't be who you are. So what was the next step in the journey?
I got frustrated and basically went on vacation in Arkansas and actually met a sheriff's department down there. They were talking about they had openings on their SWAT program. And I packed up and left and went and did a complete culture shift, went to Arkansas and found it still had some of the limitations. Good thing about Arkansas, I met my wife there, and that kind of got me to start looking at, okay, what can I do that would help me expand my horizons and still be engaged in law enforcement and protection? And we went down that road, explored a few opportunities, and then 9/11 happened. And I took a position with a company that provided security and search and rescue to the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. So the wife and I moved to Alaska for 4 years.
Oh, my word. Those are hugely different environments from New Jersey, to say the least, right?
Oh, yeah. It's been a tremendous ride. I'm really grateful to whatever powers to be that I've been able to experience all of this. And when I got there, a couple of friends that I was in the service with were like, hey, we need people with your abilities and the medical ability overseas. And that's when I started with the contracting overseas for Department of State, Department of Defense, and other government agencies. And that was the real changing moment in my life because I found it actually helped me to engage everything I enjoyed, such as private security, governmental security and law enforcement operations, the medical part, which normally up until that time, if you were a cop, you weren't a medic. If you were a medic, you weren't a cop. They really hadn't picked up on the whole synergy that somebody could actually provide both services. Mm-hmm. And so that helped me out. And I've stayed with reserve police programs and I've consulted with a bunch of them. So I stayed really active in that community. And so every time I came back home, and on my time off, I would help teach a few courses here and there. And it found that there was a real need in the marketplace and just in the public first responder arena for it. So I've become a huge advocate of that. And that helped. So one really helped propel the other side and vice versa.
Yes.
And so that's where for the last 11 years, it's just been going fantastically well. I mean, when we started our first year in business, it was, like I said, where, hey, I'm learning the dynamics. I'm working with fantastic special forces medics, Navy SEAL medics, some of the upper echelon of the government service protection details. And I was able to assimilate those into lessons learned and teachable moments for the rank and file police officers back here in the States. And it met with some resistance initially, but as we said, as the world has developed and unfortunately as terrorism has developed and these mass casualty events, whether they're man-made or nature influenced, because I mean, really at the end of the day, whether it's a tornado or an active shooter, if you have mass casualties, you have mass casualties.
Yes.
And we have to be able to get people in there, provide the services. And unfortunately, some of the standard protocols that we've used over the last 30 years of EMS just don't hold well anymore. You know, we don't have the ability to stay at a scene and work 15, 20 minutes on a patient. You know, if the scene's dynamic, if there's still a threat, we have to be able to change those protocols. And they went against conventional EMS management. And so what we found is what I end up spending quite a bit of time doing is helping to educate police and EMS agencies on how to propose legislation to their state so that they can be covered under state statutes for some of the interventions they're going to have to take. I mean, you were in the military. You remember the whole tourniquets were basically the sign of death back then. That was the absolute last resort. And here over, unfortunately, last 15 years of warfare, we found that actually judicious use of tourniquets early on saves lives. So that's been a whole complete mind shift.
Wow, it's amazing. So now they actually train, if I understand the storyline, you can actually be trained as a police officer, but also a medic police officer. You can actually do those two things together.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And some agencies do it rather well. I mean, you know, there's agencies like Port Authority up in New York. They have their own in-house medical staff. The Maryland State Police has their own life flight and stuff along that line. And it works rather well, but it takes a bit of to use an overplayed term, out of the box thinking.
Sure. And
people have to be open to the new space that we occupy.
Yeah. Well, change is hard, but you're there as a catalyst, to say the very least. Do you have allies and friends that do what you do around the world? Do y'all have any associations where you can collaborate and share innovations and things?
It's been hard, to be honest with you, because unfortunately, once you get to the national or even the state level collaborations, everybody has their little fight-em, and that's been the hardest part to overcome.
Yes.
You know, there's a national association for EMTs out there, and one of their things was they had moved, okay, we're going to take the military course and apply it to civilians, but unfortunately, you know, in the military, you can't be sued. So they're allowed to be a lot more progressive with their expanded scope of practice, those kind of things. And one of the things that caused me to have some backlash with that association was the fact that they were certifying instructors in tactical medicine, but the instructor didn't have to have a military and law enforcement background.
Oh, okay.
So I've actually made more enemies than friends by holding a line on that one, to be very honest.
Sure.
But, you know, as you know from being in the military, sometimes you learn that you do something right, not because it's easy, but it's because it's the right thing to do. So, yeah, I've had some pushback on that, but the other alliances I've been able to make with people and peers that are in the space that I occupy has been fantastic. I've met people from Jordan, from Iraq, obviously, Afghanistan, all over the world, and they share the same mindset. So we're making incremental changes in attitudes and adjustments and holding the line a little better.
No, this is utterly inspiring. I mean, given the state of the world and the fear and problems and, you know, all the things that are happening, too many on the negative side, this is utterly inspiring. You have to be utterly proud, Raffaele. This is wonderful.
You know, it goes like the saying goes, someday I hope to be the person my dog thinks I am.
Well, I think you can safely say that you've achieved that. Well, listen, you read the stats that we sent you. Why do you think it is that these surveys that are done regularly by Gallup and other great organizations around the world, they go out in the workplace, talk to people at all professions, all walks of life, all ages, and say, here's a question. Are you using the best of who you are, using your talents and skills? Are you in sync with your work? And in the majority of cases, the answer comes back no. And I qualify this by saying, hey, you know, life is hard and people have responsibilities and getting to their sweet spots is not easy. Okay, I respect that to the fullest of my being. But still, people can get to their sweet spots. Here you are in it. Why is it such a problem? What are the obstacles that you see out there that prevent people from passing into those turning points and getting to where they really want to be in their heart?
For me, it was the fear factor, first and foremost, you know, the fear of failure. Hey, I'm in a police job that, you know, 80% of the people that gravitate to that field, they are just trying to get past the civil service exam, get past the academy, okay, get past probation. And they're so scared of stepping out of line. And I justify their fear of that, but it becomes the point that once you got past that probationary period, what are you going to do to excel? And sometimes it's so much easier just to follow rank and file instead of trying to get out of that and asking why.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things that I tell my clients all the time with the guys and girls that are trying to either develop their own agency or their own career path is they surround themselves with people that haven't done it. Not that I consider myself a groundbreaker, but they tend to surround themselves with people that are happy with the status quo instead of people that are above them, not to say they're a better class of people, but the people that have been out there and done new things and tried new things, accepted failure a couple of times and still gotten back up, dusted themselves off and moved forward. And that lesson, I didn't learn that till I was in my 30s. And fortunately, I have to give credit for that one to my wife, who's always backed me up on some of the harebrained schemes I've done over the years.
Yes, good for her. Good for her.
Because without that kind of resource, when you fall down, obviously when you're by yourself, you take a little time getting up because nobody's watching. But when you have a peer group that's like, well, how long are you going to stay down? All of a sudden you'll fight a little harder to get up faster, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
And I found that by me surrounding myself with people that have done so much more than me, force recon guys, special operations guys, SWAT team members, people that just push me to excel instead of saying, okay, you know what you did yesterday is good enough. Take the day off. And that to me was the biggest thing, because we've had our fair share of failures in 11 years of business.
Sure.
But we've always gotten back up, dusted ourselves off, and kept moving forward. And I can't even say that there's an end goal, because as you know, being in business, the goal is always a floating and moving object, because the goals I had 10 years ago are definitely not the goals I had today. And I'm sure if we follow up with a second interview a year from now, that goal probably have moved a little bit more, hopefully, because if I'm pushing forward, that goal should keep pushing forward as well.
Precisely. What have been the most palpable benefits to you, frankly, just having the courage and the good fortune of having such a supportive wife and just having the grit to chisel out your own niche? How has your life benefited in any way?
I have a quality of friends that, I always joke around with all of my other friends about the downside to it is I don't have any friends that live next door, because we're from all 4 points on the compass. But the friends I have are just of such character that, there's been times I've been scratched up overseas, call a friend, and next thing I know, they're at my house in 3 hours from clear across the country, being very supportive to my wife or family needs while I'm recovering somewhere. You have a quality of friends that are of the same mindset. And I don't think I would have made those friends had I stayed rank and file and stayed either career law enforcement or career military and not tried to push to something special or something different.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
It's afforded us a lifestyle that, I don't have the lifestyles of the rich and ignorant or anything, but we are definitely comfortable in our lifestyle. I had the time to pursue these other venues where I think if I was a full-time police officer again or a full-time paramedic, I wouldn't have the free time, which is kind of an oxymoron because all my free time gets sucked into doing either volunteer work or mentoring and coaching. But it does allow me to explore those and become better, because as I try to help other people get better, I have to stay abreast of best business practices, marketing, and all that.
Well said. It's perfect. Let me ask you, what would you say to listeners around the world, wherever they are in their career, from being very young to retirement, about what are steps they would take, just briefly, just a few key pointers?
Honestly, get over the fear factor, because the fear will immobilize you. And that stops all forward progression, period. Whether it's a business venture, whether it's just walking out the front door in the morning, or whether it's, going to some of the non-permissive environments. The other thing I would say is, bite-sized pieces. If I was to look at 10 years ago, like I said, and look at where I am today, I would have been like, there's no way I'll get to that level. But you just get out and to use an old adage is become really good at the basics. Because really, at the end of the day, whether you're a neurosurgeon or an EMT basic or a first responder on the side of the road after an accident or after a shooting, everything reverts back to basic life saving. But it's being able to do those skills under duress that separate you from everybody else who wishes they would have done the right thing.
Yes, bingo. Have there been resources, books, courses that along this journey, especially the last 10 or 11 years, that you would recommend to listeners that might help them along theirs?
Yep. One of the books is The Gift of Fear, and that's by an author named Gavin de Becker, which I thought was phenomenal. It was an early read for me. I had read it for all the other reasons. I read it because of being a cop, being a private investigator, working on protection details. I wanted to work with people and kind of get them out of their shells and understand like the victim mindset. Mm-hmm. But it turned out to be so much more, because that victim mindset at that time, in my naivety, I used it more as, okay, one-on-one assault and battery, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But then I found out that translated so well over to the business mindset of people wonder, oh, why did this happen to me? Well, it happened because you didn't take a proper step or you didn't follow through. So even though he does a great job at it for a violent crime side, I was able to use it as a business model or roadmap as well.
Excellent. You know, that book has just totally gotten by me. I thank you for recommending that. It sounds like a major read. We'll definitely share it with our readers on our show notes page. What is your vision going forward in the next handful of years? You're a strategic thinker and you're a strategic actor. So what are you and your wife going to do?
Well, we're going to try to spend more time together because, as I said, the past 11 years, I've been deployed a lot. I spent a lot of time away from home. At the time, I didn't realize, but laying the base foundation of knowledge and experience to be able to predicate some of my speaking and consulting. And I'm moving more into the speaking and consulting. And plus, I'm realizing at 47, you can't be a door kicker all the time, you know. And,
that's well said.
300 pounds of lightweight stuff is still 300 pounds. And at 47, it gets older. You know, it gets harder every day.
Right.
So I'm moving now to that point where I guess I'm, without sounding full of myself or pompous, I'm trying to pass on the lessons learned, trying to pass on hopefully good knowledge to have some other people move up in their venues, whether it's, like I said, a career path or whether it's a business path, and get them to the point that hopefully they can supersede me and enjoy the benefits of getting out there, working in a space where you're outside of your comfort zone, but then all of a sudden one day you realize, wow, I'm actually pretty comfortable in this space.
Yes, exactly. What would you do differently if you had a chance to do anything differently along your whole life journey? There's an easy question for you.
Yeah. I probably would have taken more risks earlier in life, in my early 20s and stuff, okay, where I don't have many regrets, but I think about some of the opportunities that now, as they say, you know, that boat has already sailed. I think I wouldn't have had fear inundate me or, I guess, influence my decisions earlier on in life. Good. The fear of failure I never tried for special forces. Now I've worked with dozens, if not hundreds of the special operations community. And I'm not going to say I would have passed it, but at least I would have been able to say I tried it.
Yes. I think you would have passed it. So what are you proudest of?
Honestly, still being alive.
Good for you.
I've had a couple of near-death experiences and stuff, and, you know, you keep pushing on, and I guess I'm most proud of just the, not that I live for the accolades, but it's always nice when somebody that you have a lot of respect for in the marketplace, you have them in your Rolodex, or, well, I guess I'm showing my age there, in your contacts list.
All right.
And you're able to say, hey, the guy that wrote the book on ambassador protection details, I could call him up by first name and he answers my phone call.
Wow. Because,
10, 15 years ago, some of the places that I do speaking engagements to now and stuff would have never returned my phone call because they didn't. And I know this. But now it's one of those things where some of these people that I've had the honor to walk next to, whether it's here domestically or abroad, and now I get to call them my friends and my counterparts. It's a dream come true.
Well, you've got many, many years left. So at 47, to have that in your wheelhouse now, it'll pay dividends 1,000 times over. Raffaele Di Giorgio, what a great pleasure having you with us today on the show. Thank you for sharing the highlights of your remarkable life journey. And I know that listeners around the world have learned lessons that will help them on theirs. How do listeners connect with you?
They can go to my website, real simple, GOS 911. And shoot us an email. There's phone numbers on there, and we'll be more than happy. I always endeavor to return everybody's email. Sometimes if I'm out of country, it might take a day or two, but they will absolutely receive a response.
And you've got a free giveaway, this protection checklist. Tell us about that.
Basically, it's just best practices on how to protect yourself during an emergency response plans, kind of goes into the pre-planning of it, as far as how to make an emergency response plan, whether it's for a home or whether it's for your business, because they pretty much, they revolve around the same. I would love to make it extremely complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And it's just something that, well, like I said, if it helps them out, even if they take one thing away from it and it helps them to facilitate a safer lifestyle for them and their families, so be it.
Good. And how do they get your book?
The book and the free giveaway is all right there on the webpage, so it's real easy. The book is also listed on Amazon. And fortunately, with my name being Raffaele Di Giorgio, there's not a whole lot of authors. So they just punch that in. They're going to get the only book that's out there.
Yeah. And the title again?
Legal Considerations for Tactical Medical Responders, both operators and agencies.
All right, good. Well, listeners know you can go to our homepage, discoveryourtalentpodcast.com, put in this interview and find the highlights of the interview as well as these links. Very easy. Thank you, listeners across the world, for joining us. You can subscribe on Stitcher and iTunes. If you like interviews like this, we would love to have you be a part of our tribe and tell us how we can serve you best. In closing, every one of us is born with unique talents and gifts. We don't learn them and we cannot ignore them. They're just a part of who we are, our DNA. Whenever we discover them and use them in our lives and careers, we do not merely survive, we thrive in every way possible. So until next time, all my best, and whatever you do, have fun out there today.